Hello guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to install the latest version of macOS, which is currently macOS Sequoia on your Windows PC. Now this should work either you're using an AMD or an Intel based processor. Now you can dual boot macOS Sequoia with your Windows 10 or Windows 11. You can also install directly and get rid of Windows. Now whichever you want to do, we are going to guide you through both of them. Now here are the requirements. First, we need macOS Sequoia Installer File. We need Balena Etcher, which we're going to use to create a bootable disk. We need Opencore EFI configuration file. We need ProperTree. We need Explorer++. We need Gen SMBIOS, which we're going to use to generate a unique serial. We need MiniTool Partition wizard. And lastly, we need Opencore Configurator, but we're going to use that after the installation. In addition to that, we also need a 32 gig flash drive. So if you have anything around 32 gig or more, you should be fine. And we can begin the steps to actually start installing. Now the first thing we're going to do is check our processor so we know the correct Opencore EFI we are going to need. So let's hold Ctrl Shift Escape to open Task Manager and then go to Performance. Under Performance, click on CPU, and you can see right here in my case I'm using Intel Core i7 4790 CPU. This means this is a 4th generation Intel Core i7 processor because you can see it starts from 4790. Now 4th generation processors are called Haswell, 5th generation processors are called Broadwell. So you have to check what generation is your processor so you know the right steps to follow when we are building EFI. Now the Opencore EFI we're going to be using, we are going to be building it from scratch. For AMD, just take note of the processor you're using. All those using AMD processor, they're going to be working with the same thing, but those using Intel are going to be working with different things depending on the code name of their processor. Now let's close this and head to our browser. First, we need macOS Sequoia Installer File. I'm going to provide this link to MediaFire in the video description, so you can just head to this page and click on the download button. You can see download is around 16.7 gig. Next, we are also going to download Balena Etcher. Click on the download button and then download Etcher for Windows since we are using the Windows PC. So let's click on download and it is downloading. Next, we're going to download ProperTree. Now I'm going to provide the links to each and every one of these softwares in the video description so you can download yourself. So we're going to click on the link to GitHub to download ProperTree and then click on code, download zip. Next, we're going to go for Explorer++, and then we're going to click on the link to explorer++.com and then download 64 bits. Next, we're going to search for Gen SMBIOS and then open the link to GitHub as well. Click on code and then download zip as well. Next, we're going to download MiniTool Partition. Click on the link to MiniTool Partition wizard and then download free. Now we're also going to download Opencore package. So just search for Opencore package and then click on the link to Opencore right here and then download the release. So after downloading everything you need, you can close your browser. Okay, so this is macOS Sequoia installation file. This is Opencore package. This is Balena Etcher. This is MiniTool Partition wizard. This is Gen SMBIOS. This is Explorer++, and lastly, this is ProperTree. Now the first thing we have to do is to create a bootable disk, and to do that we have to install Balena Etcher. So let's double click on it. Now click on Flash from File and then locate your download folder and then select our macOS Sequoia installation file. Click on Open. Now click on Select Target and then connect your flash drive at least 32 gigabytes. Now select it from here. You can see SanDisk Cruiser Blade. Now we're going to click on Select One and then click on Flash to begin writing data into our flash drive. So this should take around 30 minutes. It may be faster or sometimes slower depending on the read and write speed of your drive. Now while this is running, we can work on other things. So let's head back to our download folder. Now the next thing we have to work on is our Opencore EFI file. Now there are 3 ways we can get this sorted. The first way is to build our Opencore EFI configuration file from scratch, which I'm going to be covering in this video, so you can learn how to build your own EFI file based on your hardware from scratch. The second step would be downloading a pre-built EFI, which I already uploaded on my website. I'll provide the link in the video description so you can head directly to this page. So you can see pre-built Opencore Hackintosh EFI for both laptop and desktop. So you just have to check the code name of your PC here. You can see Sandy Bridge, Haswell, Skylake, and everything up to 14th gen. So whichever you're using, you should find it here. Opencore desktop is for desktop and Opencore laptop is for laptop. So in my case, I'm using an Intel Core i7-4790. So I should download Haswell, since Haswell is a 4th generation CPU and this is for both Haswell and Broadwell. So we can just click on download. And then we can download the Opencore EFI from here by just clicking on download. Now the last option is to request for a custom EFI, and you can do that by clicking on custom EFI up here. You can see. Now once you click on custom EFI, it will take you to this page where you can request for a custom EFI, and I would manually build this myself, taking all your hardware into consideration. So I can just send you the file and then you can proceed to the next step of the installation. Now whichever you prefer is fine. I'll provide the links to this page to request for a custom EFI. I'll also provide the link to the pre-built EFI. Now the difference between the pre-built EFI and building an EFI from scratch is that the pre-built EFI wouldn't take consideration of your hardware, since you may have a different Wi-Fi card from the next person. But if you're requesting for a custom EFI, then you have to specify all of that here. So let's head back and then create the EFI from scratch. Now this is quite a long process, but if you follow all the steps in this video, you should be able to do it. So first, let's extract our Opencore package. Right click and extract files. Okay, let's open the file. Now head to x64 and then copy this folder called EFI right here. Let's paste it here. Also head back to our Opencore folder we're just coming from now. Go to docs and then copy sample.plist right here. Let's copy it. Head back to our download. Open the EFI folder we copied here. Go to OC and then paste it here. Now rename this sample.plist to config.plist. So just rename it to config. So this is our configuration file which should help us run macOS Sequoia on our Windows PC. So the guide we're going to be using for this installation is called Dortania guide, Opencore Dortania guide. I will also provide the link to this page in the video description, so you can just head directly here. Now from the guide right here, the step we are at is gathering files. So we have to gather files that we need based on our hardware. So under gathering files, if you scroll down, you can see the first thing we are seeing is firmware drivers, and under firmware drivers we can see universal, which is a required driver. You can see the universal one, and you can see legacy users, which is for those using legacy. So we're going to start with universal, which is our firmware drivers. So you can see these are the required ones that you must have. So let's open our drivers folder inside our EFI configuration file here. So if you go to download, open EFI, open OC, and you should find drivers. Now there are lots of drivers here which we don't really need. So just the only one we need is open canopy, open runtime, and reset NVRAM. You can delete the rest. So you can see open canopy, open runtime, and reset NVRAM. Now the work of open canopy is that it is going to give us the option to use a theme for our bootloader. So when we are booting into Mac, we're going to get a nice animation. Then we can choose the operating system we want to boot into. And for reset NVRAM, we are going to need this when we are running the installation, so it can clear up the boot options and then set Opencore there. And lastly, open runtime is a required driver, so we must have this inside. And then if we go back to our Dortania guide again, you can see open runtime is required, and then we also have HFS plus, which is required. So let's open that in new tab. and then click on the download button to download HFS Plus. It is now in our download folder. So let's just open File Explorer again down here so we can work directly from here. Go to our download folder, and here is HFS Plus. So let's just drag HFS Plus to our drivers folder here. Okay, so this is HFS Plus. After getting the firmware driver, scroll down and you should see KEXT right here. So KEXT is like your drivers which is needed for your hardwares to work. We have audio drivers, Ethernet drivers, and so much more. So you have to find KEXT based on your hardware. So let's step out from our drivers folder to our KEXT folder, and it is currently empty. Now if you scroll down on Dortania guide, you can see must have KEXT. These are KEXT that are required, and the first one is Lilu. The second one is Virtual SMC. So let's open both of them in new tab. This is Lilu. We're going to download the latest version. So click on Lilu latest release right here. Also open Virtual SMC and then download the latest release as well. Now in our download folder, let's extract Virtual SMC and also extract Lilu as well. Now let's open Virtual SMC folder right here, and then you should see KEXT inside that folder. Open the KEXT, and under the KEXT you can see lots of KEXT here, about 7 of them. Now we are only going to copy the ones that we need. So if you scroll down on Dortania guide, you can see Virtual SMC plugins. First, we need Virtual SMC KEXT, which you're going to cut there. Next, there are a few plugins we need. The first one is SMC processor. This SMC processor KEXT is used for monitoring Intel CPU temperature. So if you're using an AMD system, you don't need this. But since I'm using an Intel PC, I'm going to copy SMC processor and then paste it there. But if you're using an AMD processor, then you need SMC AMD processor, which you can click on here and then get the link, download as well. But since we're using Intel, we don't really need this. There are a few other things like Super IO KEXT, which is used for monitoring the fan speed. And again, this is not for AMD processors. So I'm using Intel, so I'm just going to copy that as well. Super IO KEXT. And you can see lots of other ones like Battery Manager, which is used to measure battery read up on laptops. But I'm using a desktop, so I am not supposed to use this KEXT since I am not using a laptop. So these are the KEXT we need from Virtual SMC. Now let's head back to our download folder and then open Lilu. You can see lilu.kext right here up here. So let's copy it and then paste it in our KEXT folder. Now what does this KEXT really look like? If you open any of these KEXT folder, you're going to see contents inside. So these are the contents of the drivers. And then if you open contents, you can see info.plist, and then you can see macOS. And then this is the actual driver, Lilu. Same thing with SMC processor. You can see it right here and the rest of them. Now let's scroll down to the next KEXT we need. So the next KEXT we need is for graphics. And for graphics, whatever grain is required. So let's open it in new tab. And then download the release. Open our download folder. Extract whatever green. Open the extracted folder. And then copy whatever green.kext. Copy. Let's paste it in our KEXT folder. And that is it. Let's head to the next step on Dortania guide. Next, we need audio support. And for audio, the driver we're going to be using is Apple ALC, which is used for patching majority of onboard sound controllers. And that is what we need. So let's open that in new tab as well. Download the latest release. Open our download folder. Extract as well. Open the extracted folder and then copy Apple ALC.kext. Copy and then paste it there. Now under Apple ALC, you can see there is something else called Apple ALCU KEXT, which is a pared down version of Apple ALC that only supports digital audio. But you can also use Apple ALC on digital audio, so we don't really need this. Next, we're looking for drivers, or KEXT rather, for Ethernet. And under Ethernet, we have Intel Mousy, which is required for majority of Intel network cards. And then we have Apple RGB and the rest of them. So to check your Ethernet card, simply head to your search bar and then search for Device Manager. Open Device Manager and you should see your hardware here. So under device manager, you would see network adapters. Under network adapters, you can see in my case, I'm using Realtek PCIe GBE family controller. I need a Realtek Ethernet driver, so I'm just going to close this and then select Realtek 8111, which is for Realtek Gigabit Ethernet. So I'm going to open that in a new tab. Now in your case, it may be different. You may be using an Intel network card, so you can download Intel Mousy, or you can be using something else. So just compare it with the list of options here. You can always read on that to see if this actually matches with what you want. And then we can download the release from here as well. Open our download folder, extract, open the extracted folder, open the release, and then you can see the kex. And then you can see the kex right here. So let's copy the kex and then paste it in our kex folder. Next, after Ethernet, we have USB, which we're going to ignore. And then next, we have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Now, for non-native Bluetooth cards, you can use Bluetooth Fix-Up. And for Intel Bluetooth cards, we can use any of these options here. The airport kex right here is for macOS 10.13 or newer, which is around High Sierra, I think. So if you're using macOS 10.13 or newer and you're using an Intel card, then you can go with this. And of course, this is macOS 15 we're trying to install, so this should work. But I don't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth adapters in my desktop, so I'm just going to ignore that. Next, we scroll down, and what you can see here is AMD CPU specific kex. This is for those using an AMD system, and the first one right here is for USB fix for AMD FX systems, and they are not recommended for Ryzen. So if you're using the Ryzen processor, then you don't need this. And it also requires that you're on macOS 10.13 or newer. But since it is not for Ryzen processors, if you're using Ryzen, then you don't need this. The second kex also here, and the last kex for monitoring power management. Next, we have extras, and Apple MCE Reporter Disabler is required for AMD systems running macOS 12.3 and later. If you're using an AMD processor, then you would need this. And then we can scroll down. The rest of them is not really needed. We are looking for things that are essential to run macOS. And then there is a kex called Restrict Events, which patches various functions of macOS. This is recommended whether you're using Intel or AMD. So we're going to open that in a new tab. Click on releases right here, and then download the latest release from here. Now we can head to our download folder, extract restrict events, open the extracted folder, copy restrict events.kex, and then paste it in our kex folder. Now let's head back to gathering files and scroll down. You can see laptop inputs and lots of other options. Now we are selecting things that we need based on our specific hardware. So you wouldn't need every single thing here. You only need the ones that matches with your hardware. Now after working with the kex, we can head back to our OC folder. And the next thing we're going to be working with is ACPI. But before we do that, let's delete kex from our download folder so we don't get confused. So we're just going to delete all the kex we downloaded since we already copied the files that we needed. Okay, I think this is clear now. Now for ACPI right here, let's open the folder, and it is currently empty. We need ACPI based on our processor. So under SSDT, we're going to scroll down and then click on Get Started with ACPI. I'm going to provide the link to this page as well. Now what we're going to use is a Prebuilt SSDT. So we're going to click on Prebuilt SSDT by the side right here, and you can see SSDT based on the PC you're using. This is the SSDT for Intel desktop. You can see for Intel laptop right here. You can see for Intel HEDT, and you can also see SSDT for AMD, those using AMD Jaguar and those using AMD Ryzen processors. If you're using a Ryzen processor, it falls under Zen, so you can just click on Zen and then check out the instructions there. But in my case, I'm using a Haswell, so I'm going to click on Haswell and Broadwell, and it should take me down here. And you can see under Haswell there are two required SSDT, which is SSDT plug Dortania and SSDT EC desktop. So let's open both of them in a new tab, and then download SSDT EC desktop. Also download SSDT plug Dortania. Now let's head back to our download folder right here. Refresh. And then copy both SSDT, plug Dortania, and EC desktop. I'm just going to cut it and then paste it in our ACPI folder. There we go. Now we can head back and we are done with SSDT. Let's head back to gathering files right here. Now one last thing we are going to add, which is not necessary, is resources. So this is going to help us style our bootloader like I talked about earlier under drivers that OpenCanopy would help us with our bootloader customization. We also need a beauty treatment for our bootloader. So I'm just going to search for Opencore beauty treatments and then open the link to Dortania guide for Opencore beauty treatment right here. And if we scroll down, you can see that for you to run our beauty treatments to customize our bootloader, we need binary resources and we need Opencore Canopy. And we already have Opencore Canopy in our drivers folder. So let's open binary resources in a new tab. And then click on code and then download zip. Now let's extract the folder. You can see OC binary data master. Extract. Open the extracted folder. Open. And then copy resources right here. Just copy it and then paste it in our OC folder. And there we go. So if we open resources, open image, you should see a theme Accidentera, and if you open it, we can see different theme styles right here. So we can now boot with the custom bootloader. And also open tools, and we can delete everything under tools since we don't really need them. So these are all the files we need to run macOS. The next thing we're going to do is begin the actual configuration of macOS. So let's head back to Dortania guide, and under Dortania guide we are going to see configs by the side right here. You can see configs for Intel desktop, you can see configs for Intel laptop, you can see configs for HEDT Intel systems as well, and you can see configs for AMD desktops as well. So select whichever you need. In my case, I'm going with Intel desktop since I'm using an Intel desktop, and I'm also going to select Haswell since I'm using a 4th gen processor. So let's click on Haswell. So these instructions are for both Haswell and Broadwell. So we're going to follow each and every one of them. So let's head back to our download folder. Now let's extract ProperTree, which is what we're going to be using to run these configurations. So let's extract ProperTree, extract files. Now open the extracted folder of ProperTree, open. And then let's run Windows batch file for ProperTree right here. Double click on it. And it should pop up a window like this. Let's close the rest since we don't need them. And it should pop up a window like this. Let me expand this. Now click on File, open, and then locate your download folder, download, locate your EFI folder right here, which we've been working on, EFI, open OC, and then select config.plist, which we renamed earlier. Select the configuration file there and then click on open. And you can see once we open it, it is going to open with random settings here, which is not what we are using. So click on File again and then click on OC snapshot. Now once you click on OC snapshot, it would open the OC folder of our EFI configuration file we selected. So all you need to do is click on select folder down here, and you should see that it should apply changes to our configuration file based on the files we updated in our OC folder. Now these 4 warnings here, we can delete them, and then don't forget to click on File and then save. Now let's collapse these drop downs. Okay, so we've collapsed all the drop down. There was no need for that, but I was just doing it so it is properly organized so we can see what we're doing. Now on the guide, let's scroll down. You can see the first thing here is ACPI, which we've already worked on, SSDT plug and SSDT EC. Now let's scroll down. And the first thing we need to work on under our configuration is kernel. So we're going to apply some changes under our kernel. So let's scroll down. And under kernel, you should see quirks. So there are different options. If we expand kernel in our ProperTree right here, you can see add, there is emulate, there is force, there is block, there is patch. We don't need to do anything to all of that. The only thing we have to work with is quirks. Now let's expand quirks under kernel. And the first option, Apple CPU PM CFG lock, we should set it to no, but we should enable it if we are running macOS 10.10 or older. Well, we are running macOS 15, so we are going to set it to no. That's Apple CPU PMF CFG lock, which is already set to no, so that's fine. Next, we have XCPM CFG lock, which we should set to true. Next, we have disable IO mapper, which is somewhere down here, right? We should set it to true. Next, we have Lapic kernel panic, which is here. We should set it to false, which is set to no already. But if you're using a HP desktop, then you would need it because you can see HP machines would require this quirk. Next, we have panic no kex dump, set it to true. True. We have power timeout kernel panic, which is this. We're going to set it to true. We have XHCI port limit, which we should set to true. But if you're running macOS 11.3 and upper, we should set it to false. So we're just going to leave it at false. Now we are done with quirks, so let's collapse and then Ctrl S to save. Scroll down, the next thing is schem, but we don't need that. And then under MISC, we have to make few changes as well. So let's collapse kernel and then go to MISC. Under MISC for boot, we should set hide auxiliary to yes. So under boot, set hide auxiliary to true. Let's just close it since it's already set to true. And then next there is debug, and under debug we need to make few changes. Under debug we should set Apple debug to true, panic to true, watchdog to true. So this is going to help us in debugging whatever goes wrong while we are trying to install. And then set the targets to 67. And then let's close MISC. And then let's collapse debug. Next, we scroll down. Under security, we have to make few changes as well. So click on security. First, allow set default to true. So let's set allow set default to true. Blacklist Apple updates, set it to yes, which is already set to true. Scan policy should be set to 0. So scan policy here, you can see numbers, so we can set it to 0 and then hit enter. Next, secure boot model, set it to default, which is already set to default. And for vault, we can set it to optional. So let's set that to optional. Okay, now let's close security and then scroll down. Under serial, we're just going to leave it like that. Tools, we are leaving it. Entries, we are leaving it. Next, we are going to NVRAM. So let's collapse mix and go to NVRAM. Under NVRAM, we are going to expand add, and then under add we are going to add a boot argument. Now this boot argument is going to help us boot into macOS, and by setting some keywords we can have access to some things that would help us understand what's going on using the boot arguments. So you can see the first boot argument here, -v, which enables verbose mode, which is going to help us see what is running. So instead of the installation to just show Apple logo, it's going to give you an inside look of what is going on, and if there is any error you're going to see the error code and everything. So we need this, and the remaining ones, they are just for debug and we don't really need all of them. But I'm going to add ALCID, which is used for setting the layout ID for Apple ALC, and this is required for audio as well. So let's just add that and then hit enter. And then for the prev language, we are going to remove this. This is a language, a default language for the installation. So once you run it, it is going to start with the default language. But if we remove this, it is going to start with a language picker, and then you can select whatever language you want. It is going to start with English and the language picker, which is going to allow you to select whatever language you want. So let's hit enter. And then these are also GPU specific boot arguments, but we don't really need any of that. Now let's scroll down. So just check whichever matches with your hardware. You can see this GPU argument is used for disabling board ID checks on some Navi GPU, which is within RX 5000 to RX 6000 series AMD RX. But we are using an RX 470, so we don't really need that. So we just scroll down and you can see Prev language, which we just removed everything that was there. Run EFI updater, set it to no, which is already set to no down here. And then scroll down, and then we should also find write flash and set it to yes. So if you look down here, you should see write flash, which is already set to true. So now we can collapse this, collapse NVRAM. Next, there is platform info. We are going to work on this later with Gen SMBIOS, so let's just ignore for now. And lastly, we have UEFI. So under UEFI, we have to make few changes. So under UEFI, we'll go to quirks, and we can see two of the changes we need to make. So let's expand UEFI, and then go to quirks, and then first ignore invalid flex ratio, set it to yes, which is true. And then unblock FS connect, set it to false, which is already set to false. But if you are using a HP motherboard, then set it to true. But since we are using an Asus motherboard, I'm just going to leave it at false. So we are basically done with setting up the configuration. Now there are few things that we need to take note of. We added Open Canopy, and then we added Opencore Beauty treatment. But for that to work, we have to make few changes in MISC. So let's go to MISC and then select boot. And under boot, you should see something that is called picker mode, which is what is going to help us select a bootloader. So we're going to set it from built-in to external. So it is going to boot with our external boot theme from our resources folder. Make sure you set it to external, and then the picker variant is set to auto. So that is all we need basically. Next, go to UEFI and then select drivers. In some cases, your drivers would be disabled by default, which we need to enable each and every one of them. So you can see driver 0 right here, which is open runtime, enabled is set to true. Driver 1 is HFS plus, enabled is set to true. And the next driver here is Open Canopy, and it is disabled. You can see enabled is set to false. So let's change that to true, and also change the last one, reset NVRAM, from false to true. So that is it. Click on file and then save. So basically, this is how to build your own EFI configuration by yourself from scratch. And we are basically done with this. So let's close this and close Opencore Dortania guide. Open our download folder again. Now let's extract Gen SMBIOS, which is what we are going to use to generate a unique serial for our macOS machine. So let's right click on Gen SMBIOS and then extract files. Now open our extracted folder for Gen SMBIOS. Open. And then you can see Gen SMBIOS Windows batch file here. Let's double click on it to open. Now make sure you're connected to the internet. The first thing we're going to do is to update Mac serial by entering 1 and then hit enter. And then hit enter to go back to the previous page. The second thing we're going to do is enter 2 to select our configuration plist file and then hit enter. Now head back to our download folder, open our EFI folder, open OC, and then drag configuration plist file here, config.plist, drag it and drop it on our Gen SMBIOS right here, our CMD window here, and then hit enter. Next, enter 3 to generate SMBIOS and then hit enter. Now we are generating SMBIOS based on a particular Mac. So for my system, I am going to generate SMBIOS for Mac Pro 7.1, which should work for most desktops, and our GPU should also be supported. I'm going to leave a link to a guide about SMBIOS and which SMBIOS you should use. So for most desktops, most of you using desktops, you would have to use Mac Pro 7.1. So if I go to Opencore guide again, get started, under choosing the right SMBIOS, you can see lots of instructions here, and from here you can see the supported SMBIOS that you can use based on your system. So in my case, I'm going to use Mac Pro 7.1. And also take note, not all graphics card works with Hackintosh. So there is also a GPU bias guide, which I'm also going to leave the link in the video description, so you can see if your GPU is actually supported, either you're using an AMD GPU or an Intel graphics card. So you can see list of AMD GPUs that are supported, so you can check if yours is supported. You can also see list for NVIDIA GPUs and also for even Intel GPUs as well. So you can just check that to see if your GPU is supported, but most of you, including me, would be using Mac Pro 7.1. So let's enter Mac Pro 7.1 and then hit enter, and it is going to generate unique serial. Now hit enter to continue, and then enter Q to quit, and we are done with that. So we can say our EFI configuration file is ready. So let's delete every other thing that we don't need. So let's just select things that we've already used and we no longer need. So we've deleted some of the things we don't need. Now our flash drive is still writing data, validating data rather, and it should take around 2 minutes to finish up the process. But before we complete that, let's check up on where we plan to install macOS. So let me go to my search bar and then search for partition. Now click on create and format hard disk partitions right here. And under create and format hard disk partitions, you should find all your hard drives here. Alright, so in my case, I have just one hard drive in this system, disk 0, which is my SSD with around 120 gigabytes. And disk 1 here is our removable flash drive, which we are using to boot. So first, where do we want to install macOS? Well, I have just 120 gig and I may want to install macOS alongside Windows on this hard drive. So which is what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to right click on this drive and then click on shrink volume. So I'm going to shrink this drive and allocate a certain amount of space to install macOS. So you can see I can allocate around 64,000 megabytes, which is 64 gig. So let's just say I'm going to give it around 62 gig and then shrink. Now if you have more than one drive on your system, you don't really need to shrink. You could just install on your second drive and your first drive would continue to have Windows in it, or you could just erase everything and then install macOS if that is what you want. But in my case, I want to do a boot with both macOS and Windows, so I can boot into whichever I want when I'm booting up my PC. And here we go. So you can see 61 gig of unallocated space. Now let's right click and then create a new simple volume with this unallocated space. Click on next, next, assign a letter. I'm just going to call it maybe M. Next. Now let's give it a name. Let me just call it macOS 15, so we can easily recognize this when we are running the installation. And then click on next, finish. So here we go. This is 61 gigabytes and this is where we're going to be installing macOS. Now let's close this and you can see Balena Etcher has finished writing data to our flash drive. So let's close Balena Etcher as well. Head back to our download folder. And from here, let's install MiniTool Partition wizard right here. So let's double click to install. Continue installing the free edition. Next, next. And we are done with the installation. So it should open up just like this. So the reason why we are using MiniTool Partition wizard is we want to give a letter to the EFI partition of our flash drive, so we can copy our EFI files there. So you can see disk 1 and disk 2. By default, we can do that using the default disk management by Windows. So under disk 2, you can see 16.4 gigabytes, which is where macOS 15 currently is. And you can also see EFI partition of 200 megabytes. So right click on the EFI partition and then click on change letter. Assign any letter to it because it doesn't really have a letter at the moment. So I'm setting it to X and then click on OK. Click on apply. down here. Yes. Okay. Now let's close this and then open our download folder again. Next, we're going to extract Explorer++. So let's right click and then extract files. Now open the extracted folder for Explorer++, and you should find Explorer++ application right here. Right click and run as administrator. Okay, so now you should find EFI X partition, which we just changed the letter now. We changed the letter to X, so this is it. Let's open it and delete everything that is inside. Now let's open our download folder from here and then copy our EFI folder, which we've been working on all this while. Copy, go to this PC and then find EFI X. Let's paste it there. Okay, we've copied the file. Now we can close this. We are basically done with each and every one of the steps, so we can restart our PC and then start the installation. So let's restart. Hold F9 or F12 to boot into your BIOS. It may be different depending on your motherboard. Now let's go to advanced mode. I am using an Asus motherboard. First, we're going to go to advanced settings, CPU configuration, and then enable virtualization technology, Intel virtualization technology. And you can go back. We're going to go to boot settings and disable fast boot. Also scroll down so we can enable 4G decoding. If you have that option in your BIOS, enable it, and then also disable secure boot. So let's select secure boot and then go to key management, clear all secure boot keys. So we're going to clear secure boot keys, go back, and you can see secure boot is now disabled. Now we can scroll down to our boot options and then set the first boot option to our USB flash drive. You can see UEFI SanDisk. Now we can disable the rest. Now let's save changes and reset. Now select install macOS 15 beta and then continue. It should take few seconds to a minute to boot up. Now set a language for the installation and then continue. Next, select disk utility so we can erase the disk and then begin the installation. Now we're going to select the drive we partitioned earlier. In my case, it is macOS 15. So click on it and then click on erase. Now we're going to set the format to APFS, and that is the format macOS recognizes. So set the format to APFS and then erase. Now click on done. Let's close this window. Now select install macOS 15 beta and then continue. Click on continue. Now agree to the terms of service. Here we can select our drive macOS 15, which we erased just now, and then continue, and it should begin the installation. Now the installation should take around 30 minutes to an hour. It all depends on your hardware. It may restart severally while installing, but you just have to wait. The installation process is complete. Now let's select a language for the setup and then continue. Set your country or region, continue. Now you can set everything else based on your personal preference. So I'm just going to skip through this entire setup. You should also set your username, which we're going to use to access this machine, and the password as well. And then continue. Now choose your theme. You can either go with the light mode, the dark mode, or auto. So just choose and continue. And the installation is complete. And you can see macOS Sequoia has been successfully installed. Now if we go to Apple logo and then go to about this Mac, you can see this is iMac Pro 3.6 GHz Core i7, and my GPU Radeon RX 470 8GB is also showing. This is my RAM, and you can see this is running macOS 15.0 beta. So everything is working as it should. Ethernet is working as well. Now if you remember, we are booting from our flash drive, but we need our EFI configuration file on our main drive. And to do that, we need to head to our browser and download Opencore Configurator we talked about earlier. So search for Opencore Configurator. And then add the keyword eTech box, which is our website, and that is where we are downloading from. So click on the link to eTech box Opencore Configurator, and then click on the download button right here, download, allow, and it should start downloading Opencore Configurator. Now let's close Safari and then open our Finder, open download folder, and this is our Opencore Configurator. Let's drag it to our desktop. And then let's run it. Double click on it to run. And you can see Apple could not verify Opencore Configurator. Now just click on done. Okay. And then go to system settings. Now scroll down under system settings and click on privacy and security. Scroll down. And you can see Opencore Configurator was blocked to protect your Mac. Now click on open anyway. Open anyway. Enter your password to confirm. And Opencore Configurator is now open. Now just close this. Close this. And if you look up here, you can see an icon for Opencore Configurator. Let's click on the icon. And you should find EFI partition on your hard drive and on your flash drive. So you can see the first one right here is my hard drive, HFS 128GB. And the second one right here, you can see Opencore boot partition, which is our flash drive. So let's mount our flash drive, enter your password to confirm. Let's also mount our hard drive. And then let's open partition for our flash drive and also open partition for our hard drive. Okay. So don't mix the two together. One of them is for a hard drive and one of them is for a flash drive. So if you open this EFI right here, you can see this is for our flash drive with boot and OC, which is our Opencore files. And then if you open EFI on our hard drive, we can see our Microsoft boot files. Now all you need to do is copy boot and OC into our EFI on our main drive. And then if it shows any prompt to replace, just click on replace. So this way we'll be able to boot with both Mac OS and Windows. Now if you want to boot with just Mac OS, then you can delete Windows from here. But since I want to boot with both Mac OS and Windows, I'm going to leave both of them there. Now we can close this, and then use Opencore Configurator again to unmount both partitions. We can just eject. Okay, now we can restart our PC and it should boot directly from our main drive and we no longer need the flash drive. You can now choose between Windows and Mac OS, and that is all basically. Now you can log in. If this video was helpful, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on your post notification. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.